Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I had a gentleman who is incredibly knowledgeable about transit on my show about a year ago, and he goes by the name WB62 on social media. He's an incredibly knowledgeable guy about what's going on in the transit world in the Greater Toronto Area, particularly what Metrolinx, TTC, etc., are thinking about and planning. And so I wanted to have him back so we could chat a little bit about some of the current plans that both the city is talking about, the province is talking about, Metrolinx are talking about, that came out sort of during the political campaign, and put them in the historical context of some of the things that we were talking about from a transit standpoint previously. And so he sent me a great presentation that those of you that are interested will be able to see online and on social media, and those on the radio will describe it to you. So WB62, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good. How about you? Thank you for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure to have you back. I love your social media posts on a regular basis about what people are thinking about in regards to transit. So tell me, if you could, what is going on from a transit standpoint? You did a schematic that you sent to me that was from when, 1950 something or other?
So this was from 1989. This was
1989. Sorry.
proposed. This was proposed by a group of individuals under the name Think Rail Group to the Minister of Transportation and also the federal government. This was a proposal to basically enhance and expand GO Transit beyond 9 to 5 commuting. So if you were like back in the day, uh, the GO train used to run into Toronto in the morning and then out back home in the evening. If you wanted to go maybe towards Newmarket in the morning, you just didn't have an option to, just because the train service was so focused on 9 to 5 commuters. The people in this group wanted to change that and to
Well, and and
expand
and
GO
and
Transit
sorry for
to
interrupting,
be
but
two-way
nine
all day. Nope, no
it's
problem.
9 to 5 into the city, not even 9 to 5 out of the city. So if you wanted to go from downtown Toronto to Newmarket or to Mississauga or to Markham to work, you couldn't do it. So it's 9 to 5,
Nope,
yes, but 9 to 5 into the city in the morning and out of the city in the evening.
very commuter
One way.
centric. So this plan was a three-phased plan. It was going to enhance and expand service around Toronto. So there was in phase one, there was going to be enhanced service to Oshawa and Hamilton, and also new services to London and Kitchener-Waterloo. And then the next two phases were going to focus on expanding outside of that. So service from Kitchener-Waterloo to Cambridge or to Woodstock, or from London through St. Mary's and Stratford to Kitchener as well. There was also going to be services very heavily focused on the airport. So many services would divert through the airport underneath it. To Hamilton and to Milton and to Kitchener, as well as lines using the Midtown Toronto line through Summerhill Station, which created non-union centric services. So if you didn't want to go to downtown Toronto, you had the option to go to other places.
And then what you've done is you've sort of taken these and separated them out into separate lines. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. So this was the ones you are seeing right now, the colorful ones. They are um, another part of the proposal that came on a little bit later when the federal government in 1990 announced their plans to discontinue via rail service across the whole country. They did not want to operate it anymore, which would have taken away transit access to thousands of communities across the country. The Think Rail group reformed their plan to expand transit around Toronto to also include the Via Rail lines running within the province of Ontario. So services to Sarnia, to Buffalo, Detroit, all of the services that Via Rail would have previously ran, Go Transit would have taken over.
And so right now, Via does go to Windsor, right? It doesn't go to Sarnia, does it?
Yeah, it goes to Sarnia and Windsor, as
Does
well as
okay.
Montreal and Ottawa, which are the most popular lines.
And so,
Um,
these stations that you've got, does Via Rail stop at them all? They stop at Oakville. I don't think they stop at Burlington, do they?
no, so these maps focused on what they stopped at in the 90s. So this was before Aldershot Station opened, which consolidated the Burlington and Dundas stops together.
Okay. And then do they
Um,
stop at Brantford and Woodstock and
yep,
Ingersoll?
Brantford, Woodstock, Ingersoll, London, Strathroy, Wyoming, and Sarnia. The only one that they do not stop at is Watford in this map right here.
Okay, so we do
So
have
this
this
is
service
the
right now via.
yep to Sarnia. It is only one train a day though right now. Back in the day, it would have been I believe four, but it's been cut down over the years.
And then this next map takes you where? This is interesting.
So this takes us forward to 2025. This was the proposed Midtown line that the current provincial government promised in their election campaign. So this was a part of the Go 2.0 proposal. This proposal came kind of out of nowhere, honestly. It came from the progressive conservative government during their re-election, and it was going to expand Go to both Midtown Toronto as well as Bolton.
So this
Um,
is fascinating because it starts in Mississauga
yes.
at Streetsville. It could actually start farther west than that if it wanted, but it goes from Streetsville right through sort of the center of Mississauga, and then adds I guess a stop at Lambton, which I don't think, or a junction that exists today, because the GO train does go from Streetsville, but at about Kipling, it goes on to Dundas West and then downtown to Union Station. And so this would be instead of taking the train tracks that take it down to the lakeshore and Union Station, it would be to continue along those CP rail lines that are around what DuPont and Davenport, right across the center of the city, sort of north of the annex, north of Rosedale, sort of cutting through Forest Hill. And as you show here, stopping at that Summerhill LCBO. That Summerhill LCBO used to be the main CP passenger rail station in Toronto before what, World War II. And then
Yeah, it used to be very busy, and provided an alternative station to Union. So, not everyone wants to go downtown. Some people want to go to other places in Toronto, and that station gave the opportunity to do that. But it closed sometime in the late 20th century.
and then continuing on through Thorncliffe Park, right by the Science Center, which is not going to be the Science Center, and out through sort of northeastern Toronto, Scarborough, etc. I think this one makes a ton of sense because, as you say, it does provide potentially a another way to get downtown other than through Union Station. And for people that are either going to sort of Bloor Street, it would be sort of an express to Yorkville, to Bloor and Young, etc., rather than having to get off at Kipling or Dundas West and taking the subway all those stops. And for anyone going north of Summerhill, Young and Eglinton, Young and Shepherd, which are pretty high concentrations of office workers, residential, et cetera. That would be another great way to get to the north part of the city, center and north part of the city, rather than having to go through Union Station. So why hasn't this one been built? It makes a ton of sense, and the tracks are right there, right now, already.
This line has appeared many times over the years, ever since the early 1960s, when Go was being thought up of. There was an idea to run service along this line as well. Um, every single time this proposal has come up, it's always been shot down either due to cost or to freight train conflicts. But freight train conflicts can be solved if Metrolinx is willing to invest in the corridor to separate passenger rail and freight rail traffic. You can absolutely run passenger rail along this corridor. There is enough room for extra tracks and enough room for stations. It's just all comes down to cost.
I was in New York recently, and I was chatting with someone, and they were telling me that I don't know. I haven't checked these numbers, so I'm not sure if they're right. But the subway that goes between Harlem and Wall Street, the Seventh Avenue subway, has 49 stops, and I was told that no one would take the subway if it was 49 stops. But they built brilliantly when they built it initially, four tunnels, so they could have an express. And the subway, the Seventh Avenue Express, is only seven stops between Harlem and Wall Street. And so they were telling me that 75% of the people using the Seventh Avenue subway transfer between the express and the local as they're transferring from wherever they are in northern Manhattan to Times Square or to Penn Station or to the Wall Street, etc. And we didn't when we built Bloor Subway or the Young Subway. We only built two, and so we don't have an express. And they described this, the mid Toronto, as potentially the express because you could get from Kipling to Summerhill in half the stops, if not less, if you wanted, than you would on the Bloor Subway. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so in this case, it would be four stops between Kipling and Summerhill. So it would only, with electric trains or even without electric trains, it would only take maximum 15 to 20 minutes. Um, and that in itself is much faster than the subway. It also acts as a relief. So when people want to get off the subway and take the faster train service, if it existed, the TTC won't have to invest in the subway as much to keep the capacity up because so many people will be able to divert to this new line. It's unfortunate that it was never built when it could have been, and that even if it appears on maps right now, it's still not a very serious proposal quite yet. It's
That's too
not.
bad. I think, I have people. I've lived in Mississauga for a long period of time, as you may know, and I've had lots of people say, the problem is our city really doesn't tie well together because if someone invites you for dinner in Scarborough, or the reverse, if you're in Scarborough and they invite you for dinner in Mississauga, you're going to say no because it's like an hour and a half to get across the 401. And if you're taking transit, you got to go through Union Station and it's incredibly congested and time consuming as well. This would knit our city together. And the other example I give you is the Queen Elizabeth line. You've probably taken a look at it and studied it in London, England, initially called the Crossrail, and it did the same thing. For the first time, it actually connected rail lines on one side of London to the other side of London, allowing you to go quickly through. They've already paid it back in 2 to 3 years of operation. It is the most popular line now in England, in London, because it ties the city together like it's never been tied together before. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think if we were able to do the Midtown line now, it would absolutely replicate what has happened over in the United Kingdom. Um, it would indeed tie the city together. It opens up so many possibilities to relieving existing lines as well as bringing new riders to transit. And it makes so much sense. It's so shocking that it hasn't been built yet, and it's just purely because it has a high upfront cost. But as you said, the Elizabeth line has already paid itself back, and that's something that could totally happen here if the Midtown line existed.
And the vast majority of the Elizabeth line was similarly done on what were originally freight lines. Now, they had to build a brand new tunnel in the middle of the city, which would be far more expensive than what we're talking about, because here you're on existing rail right of ways the whole way through the city. So you're building either potentially new lines, which would be hopefully far better, softer lines than the existing freight lines, and or you're just moving freight traffic off of the freight or limiting the freight traffic. And you know what? The other thing is we've got dangerous goods, oil and other dangerous goods going right through the center of Toronto on this line right now with the CP line. And that's another issue. Do we really want that? Is that the right thing when there is rail available, up by the 407 north of the city, which is where CN takes all of its traffic? And so why we allow CP to take all that freight traffic through the center of the city, particularly the dangerous goods, when, in Calgary and Lake Megantic, we've had great examples elsewhere. Frankly, in Mississauga, right there by Arundel, we had in, what was it, 1978, was it?
I believe early 80s, late 70s. Yeah, I believe so.
The uh, the 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 disaster there, and I think it was the largest peacetime evacuation in a urban environment in all of Canada, when the trains flipped over near Arundel, and so it can happen. It's happened there. It's happened in Lake Megantic. It's happened in Calgary, and we're still allowing CP to take that dangerous goods right through the center of the city. I don't think it makes sense. And if you freed up that line, forced them to go north of the city on the existing lines that CN goes on, you would dramatically reduce the cost of actually implementing this service. So I think that makes a ton of sense. We got to take a break for some messages. We're going to be 2 minutes telling you about some of the things that you should be thinking about in Mississauga, Brampton, Peel area. And then we're going to come back and continue talking about transit and what are some of the great ideas that people can be thinking about and that our guest has studied for transit improvements in the Greater Toronto Area. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got WB62, who is a transit social media guru, who's sorry about that, with me tonight to talk about transit improvements in the Greater Toronto Area. What Go Transit, Metrolinx, the province of Ontario are thinking about, and he's put together some maps that really depict what's going on in incredible detail and really bring to life some of the things that we're thinking about. And for people that are on social media and or on YouTube, you can check out these maps on my feeds, but we're going to describe it for all of you on radio as well. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Good. How about you?
Very well, thank you. So tell me about this overall map that you put together that show numerous different developments. That you don't have it going all the way out to Sarnia and Windsor, but this is sort of a plan that I think is doable. Tell me about this one if you could.
So this is everything currently proposed for the Go Transit network as of 2025. So this includes everything that the provincial government promised in their election campaign, as well as all the current proposed stations from the City of Toronto, developments, and Metrolinx. So there are multiple new services across the region that are being looked into. In the west, there is the Cambridge line from Guelph Central Station to Pine Bush in Cambridge. This is being studied by the region. It would operate independently of the current Go Transit Kitchener line, but it would tie into those schedules. So when a Kitchener line station would stop at Guelph, the Cambridge train would be waiting to take everyone to Cambridge if they wanted to go there. More centrally, the Bolton line is currently being proposed. This
So this one
line
is
will,
interesting because it's an existing rail that is dramatically underused and really goes sort of diagonally northwest of the city by the airport and or at least near to the airport and through an area of suburban Toronto that's growing incredibly quickly. Is that not the case?
yeah, so Bolton and the Caledon area is growing rapidly, and there's also investment from car manufacturers to build more assembly plants in that area. So it's the population is just going to skyrocket over the next few years.
So
And this area
there was
has
one
very,
proposal that had Caledon going from 50,000 people to 500,000 people over the course of the next 10 or 15 years. So 50,000 to 500,000. And you think about that, if you don't have transit, that's going to be a nightmare on the highways and the highways that don't exist, let alone if we don't build 413. So I think this proposal makes a ton of sense.
yeah, absolutely. And it also connects other areas inside Vaughan and the city of Toronto that are currently not served by transit very well either. It provides a nice relief to the new LRT lines that are being built at stops on Finch Avenue, and it makes so much sense. It's surprising that it hasn't been done already, but at least it's being considered now.
Excellent. And then what's the next one you've got? Is that the Mid Toronto line again?
Yeah, so this is the Mid-Toronto line, but now you can, for people that are watching, you're able to see how it interacts with the current network. So it begins in Streetsville in Mississauga along the current Milton line. It runs alongside the Milton line through every station, as well as new stations in Lambton and Junction. It then crosses over.
Sorry, just to interrupt, but Lambton
Yeah,
and
no
Junction,
problem.
that's interesting. That's not currently on that existing GO line that goes into the center of the city from Mississauga. So those would be brand new stops. Is that correct?
Brand new stations. Yep. Um, Junction would be more very close to the big junction, the big rail junction, and it would serve that neighborhood that really doesn't have a lot of good access to go right now. After that, the Midtown line would then go through Dovercourt, DuPont, and then to Summerhill, the big station.
And then
Uh,
again, at Summerhill, it would connect up with with the Young Subway, correct?
yeah, so both DuPont and Summerhill, it would connect to Line 1, the two different legs of it in the east and the west. And it would provide a lot of relief to uh, just to line one itself. You know, if everyone is taking line one to Bloor Young to then transfer to the Bloor Danforth line, now you have the option to take the Midtown line instead,
Yeah,
which
so I
could be a
think
faster alternative.
if you combined the TTC with Metrolinx, you would see how critically important and I think beneficial that Summerhill station, that DuPont station would be.
Yeah. So from there on, it would go and interline with the Richmond Hill line, which would get rerouted to an existing piece of track outside of the Don Valley. So that line would no longer be susceptible to flooding. It would stop at Thorncliffe Park and Sunnybrook Park.
And would
Uh,
it connect up with the Ontario line, the new subway that the TTC Metrolinx are building out to that area?
it's unclear via the maps. However, the stations would be within around 300 meters of each other. So I imagine there would be some sort of linkage between them,
Right.
whether it be a tunnel or a pedestrian bridge. Um, from then on, the Midtown line branches off from the Richmond Hill line. It stops at Lawrence and Ellesmere in the city of Toronto, and then it connects to the Stouffville line at Agincourt South Station. So Agincourt South Station is a little bit separated from the existing Agincourt Station on the Stouffville line, but it is within a 400-meter walk. So it's a possible connection. It's just not one that's the stations aren't right on top of each other.
Now, I thought this line also went to the zoo, so it doesn't go to the zoo?
It doesn't go right to the zoo, but it goes closer than the other GO lines would right now.
I think it'd be
S-
spectacular if it went right to the zoo. I always thought it was fantastic if it connected Casa Loma, Ontario Science Center, and the zoo, which it's damn close to if the Science Center stayed, because three of the largest tourist attractions in Ontario would right be on the same line.
It could connect to the zoo via a bus service, if that were to be implemented. Right now, the Go bus does go from, I believe, Pickering Station to the zoo in the summer season. I could easily see another sort of situation happening on the Midtown line if that opens.
And this line, actually, if you ever wanted to, continues on to Peterborough, does it not?
Yeah, if you wanted to, this line could easily go up to Peterborough. In the Go 2.0 proposal that the provincial government put out, it only goes as far as Claremont, and I believe was originally going to go to Pickering Airport before that was canceled. Um, but it could easily go to Peterborough. It'd be a very easy extension once this line is built.
Now, those are the new lines. But in addition, have they not also suggested a couple of stations to be added?
Yeah, many stations across the network, actually.
Tell me about some of
So
them.
within the city of Toronto, I'm sure everyone's heard of it before, the Smart Track plan, which has evolved greatly over the past few years from being a surface subway line, basically competing with GO lines, to now being integrated into the GO transit plans. Um, this whole project is essentially going to increase the coverage within the city of Toronto, as many GO lines pass through the city but don't stop. So Liberty Village would get connected on the Kitchener and Up Express. Caledonia would connect to Line 5 on the Barrie line, and St. Clair Old Weston on the Kitchener line as well. These are all areas that are currently underserved by GO Transit, but will eventually have direct access once these stations open. There is also East Harbor to the east of downtown, which will connect to a new transit-oriented development and the Portlands
And the Ontario line, right?
and the Ontario line. Yes. And then on the Silver line, you have Finch Kennedy Station between Agincourt and Milliken, which will connect to Finch Avenue on all the bus routes that currently run along there. To the west, you have a new station at Humber Bay called Park Lawn, which serves an area dramatically underserved by all sorts of transit in the city.
Yeah, so that's that
Um,
big Humber Bay area that's grown up like crazy with a whole bunch of condos, but also 24 acres of land at that old Mr. Christie site that is going to be developed eventually into a mini city, and the GO train stop's going to be right there. So I think that's incredibly impactful for that area. As you may know, some of those condos actually provide shuttle service by bus van to downtown Toronto, and so therefore putting them on transit, I think makes a ton of sense.
yeah, absolutely. The population of Humber Bay is going to double to triple in the next couple of years as the developments get built. It's very very lucky that they have a line running through that a station can be built because not many places have that luxury. So it's beautiful that we're building development where stations can be in the future.
And then Lakeview, I think, is spectacular.
Lakeview, yes. So this is a newer proposal station. This came up last year and then was officially announced in the election campaign for the new provincial government. This station would be located between Port Credit and Long Branch GO Station and would connect to the new Lakeview development in Mississauga, which is a new waterfront development that will host uh, thousands of jobs per day and also house over 30,000 people. Um,
30,000 people? Seriously?
up to 30,000 people, yeah. So it will give all of those people access to rail service direct to downtown Toronto, or if you wanted to go to Niagara Falls or Hamilton, three big areas that you're essentially in the middle of when you're in Lakeview. So having the luxury of being able to take trains anywhere you want to go essentially is it's just perfect.
Now, does it go farther out to the east at all?
Yes. So the on the Lakeshore East line, there is currently a proposal to extend service beyond Oshawa east to Bowmanville, which is it's been talked about for many years, but it is starting to mobilize now. There's a lot of surveying and construction or preliminary construction happening. This, I believe, is the most far along proposal on this list since it is actively under construction right now.
And then I think the other thing is, I'm not sure about all the lines, but on that Mississauga Milton line, going to all day two way. As we talked about off the top of the show, the Lakeshore line is all day two way, both directions and frequent. Right now, most of these other lines, a lot of these other lines, are still only one way into the city and one way out. So going to all day two way is, I think, critically important. And is that on all the lines or just on some of the lines?
So right now, over the past 7 years, a lot of the other Go lines besides Lakeshore have implemented two-way service. Um, so the Kitchener line, for example, now has service every 30 minutes to Bramalea Station all day. And the Berry line has service every hour to Aurora. The Stova line also has service every hour to Mount Joy. So we are going in, stepping slowly in the right direction to being able to have all-way, two-way service frequently. But we are kind of in a transition period right now. The Milton line, however, is still peak only right now. So you can only go in the morning and out in the evening from Toronto.
I think that's a huge mistake. And the big move that was done, when was that? Like that was 10, 15 years ago. They identified that Mississauga Milton line had an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio if they made it all day two-way frequent GO train service. And most rail is like in the 1-to-2 benefit to cost ratio. And that one they identified as 8-to-1. And as you said, the biggest challenge being that they didn't want to spend the money getting rid of the freight trains on that CP line that goes right through the center of the city. I wish they would. This is pretty
You don't
exciting.
need,
You think it's going to get built?
I believe a lot of this will get built. Obviously, there's a chance for everything to, become stalled and funding to dry up. But I believe the current government is pretty good with funding transit. Even though it may not seem like that, there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to improve Go Transit service, and I believe um, a lot of these stations are, or at least the new stations along existing lines will get built, especially stations like Park Lawn and Humber Bay that is already beginning construction as we speak, essentially.
So in between Dixie and Kipling on the Mississauga Milton line, I wish they would add a station at Sherway. 25% of the people that go to Yorkdale come by way of subway, and I think that creates sort of an opposite direction traffic for that university line on line one. People going and obviously dramatically reduces traffic of all the people that go to that regional shopping center. If we could have a station and the track is not that far away from Sherway, I think that makes a ton of sense. I also think that there is a rail line owned by Metrolinx that goes from just east of Long Branch up to Kipling, and then there's a right of way that goes to the airport. So if you think about another north-south line that goes from sort of Long Branch to Kipling to the airport, I think that would be spectacular.
So Sherway Gardens, that was a proposed station many years ago when Metrolinx was looking into potential station sites for the region. They'd identified over 100 different sites that could potentially support transit. Sherway Gardens did have a station, but it never made it through their whittling down plans. So essentially, identifying 30 prime candidate stations for the region. Sherway Gardens never made it through, which is unfortunate because, as you said, Yorkdale has a lot of traffic going to it, and Sherway could easily have just as much traffic going to it if it had a rail connection. Um, for the line between Long Branch and Kipling, that does exist and it is owned by Metrolinx right now, but it's only used for diversion routes as well as maintenance. It's basically just a backup route, um, just in case something were to happen on either the Milton or the Lakeshore line. Either both of them can divert on that line to still get to Union Station. The it doesn't have a connection to Pearson Airport, but it does have a connection to Summerhill. That line leads right to the Summerhill station. So there is a potential opportunity, if you wanted to be very ambitious, to have trains from Hamilton and Niagara Falls. Instead of going to Toronto Union Station, they would go to Summerhill Station, giving people that extra opportunity to go somewhere other than downtown.
This is pretty exciting. I hope it happens. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with our expert on what's going on with transit in the Greater Toronto Area in just 2 minutes. So, everyone, please stay with us. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight about transit and transit improvements in the Greater Toronto Area with our specialist, WB62. I got to tell you, if you have a chance, check him out on Twitter, WP62, and or other social media. This guy on a regular basis posts about some of the announcements of transit, some of the progress that we're making, and then puts it all together in maps that to make it really easy to understand what's going on. And I really appreciate you joining me again. This is the second time I've had you on talking about transit. So let's talk about this Buffalo line. This is, I think, interesting that it would actually take GO Transit right into Buffalo. Is that true?
Yes, so this isn't a current proposal. This was something we mentioned earlier in the radio hour. This was the Think Rail Group proposal for GO Transit to absorb Via Rail service within the province of Ontario and essentially integrate the Via Rail service into GO. So, in terms of timetable and fares and departure times, everything would be lined up between Via Rail and Go to create the most convenient network for everyone in the region. So, this was the Think Rail Group's second version of their proposal once the federal government announced plans to cut Via Rail service. This was their contingency plan to keep service running throughout the province of Ontario in case Via Rail were to disappear. The Union Station to Buffalo line would have been very interesting because it would have crossed the border, something that not even Via Rail did. This was something that the Think Rail Group thought would have been a good idea to connect the two metropolitan areas together. Um, because
I
at
think
the
it makes a ton of
time,
sense when you think about the tie-in economically between, northwestern New York State, Buffalo particularly, but also Niagara Falls, New York, and a lot of the industry in that area. A lot of it is very connected into southwestern Ontario and the Greater Toronto Area. There's numerous airlines that do freight into Hamilton and ship from Hamilton into New York State, and we're a lot closer to Buffalo than Buffalo is to New York City. And so I think this makes a ton of sense and would really grow our economies. There was a line that went from Niagara Falls to Fort Erie that was ripped up and replaced with a walking trail. So could we actually connect Niagara Falls to Fort Erie today, do you think?
no, today it would be very hard to do so, at least through that original alignment, because the Fallsview Casino was actually built over top where that line went. So you'd either have to dig under the Fallsview Casino or divert around Niagara, which would be both very costly and also kind of remove the point of the line, as then you would be missing, the big tourist attraction at Niagara.
Yeah, what a shame. They actually, you may know this, they left a big hallway, like a massive hallway underneath the casino in case anyone wanted to actually put the rail through back in again. So you could do it, but as it would probably be pretty expensive. And I think it's only wide enough for one track, but it does exist. And the right of way and the track exists from just south of Fallsview Casino all the way out to Fort Erie. So there's only that gap between just south of Fallsview Casino up to the Niagara Falls existing railway station, where the other line takes it across the Niagara River to Niagara Falls, New York, and on to New York City, the Amtrak line. Okay, and then you've got a couple of other interesting proposals. You got one that goes from Union Station to Sudbury.
Yeah, so this was another line in that Via Rail Go takeover that I was talking about. This would have gone from Union Station through Barrie, Aurelia, and Perry Sound up to Sudbury. So this would have been taking over one of the old Via Rail lines that ran up there and integrating it into the Go service. So
Didn't the province just recently announce they're going to start this rail service again?
not this service, but they were going to start the Ontario Northlander service from Union Station to North Bay and to sorry, not Timmins, North Bay and to just north of there. This service was cut in 2012, and the government of Ontario is looking to restart that service essentially.
You know, my mother, when she was a teenager, would summer in Muskoka, and they all took trains from Union Station up to Muskoka. And I think they stopped at Gravenhurst. And there was a stop at Gravenhurst. There was a stop at Bala. There was a stop north of that. I think that if we had train service between Union Station and particularly if it stopped, maybe within the Greater Toronto area, and then took you to cottage country, it would dramatically increase the the tourism demand in that area, dramatically decrease the traffic on the 400. I was in New York recently, and I took a express that left from Penn Station that went out to the Hamptons and Montauk. It was packed with people all Friday afternoon, a few trains. Why don't we have that kind of service?
So all of that we had service crossing the province of Ontario in every direction you can imagine back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. But as Via Rail Via Rail service used to be run by CN and CP Rail, but was then nationalized to one big government-owned railway. And that works well, and it works perfectly if your government is willing to fund that service. But the federal government cut Via Rail service dramatically in the 80s and 90s, which eliminated rail service to thousands of communities across Ontario and Canada. Um, so we had the service, we lost it due to lack of funding. Essentially, it's
It's such
very
a shame.
unfortunate.
There's also a rail line that goes from Toronto to Orangeville to Collingwood that would take it up sort of the other side of Georgian Bay up the Bruce Peninsula. Is that not correct?
I don't know if it goes all the way up to Collingwood, but the Toronto to Orangeville line is a very, very, very has very good potential. It's just not being realized either. It's something where we are going to realize how important it was after we have either sold the land or converted it from a railway to a trail,
I
which is
agree.
very unfortunate.
Yeah, the city of
Um,
Brampton, I think, actually owned it or something, and it there was a tourist rail that went from Orangeville to Brampton, but no one ever did anything else with it. What about this one, Union Station to Sarnia? This is sort of what we talked about a little while ago, correct?
yeah, so this was the Union Station to Sarnia line, which would have been another service taken over by Go from Via Rail. It still exists today. This exact service still runs, although less frequently than it did in the 90s. And
And then
here's
one to
and
Detroit.
yes, this is an interesting one. So this would have been taking over the Via Rail line from Union Station to Windsor with an additional extension to Detroit. The Think Rail group thought that connecting Detroit and Toronto would have been good economically and would have,
Again, I think it makes a ton of sense.
me too. This was the this is a current proposal. We talked a little bit about this earlier. This is the Union Station to Caledon line through Bolton. So this was a current project outlined by the government of Ontario that um, is currently being studied, but not under construction quite
It's an
yet.
existing rail line
Yep.
that is sitting there unused, going through, diagonally through northwestern, GTA up to Bolton, Caledon, and through Woodbridge, Kleinburg, etc. I think this makes a ton of sense, and also connects up, as you mentioned, with Bloor, Dundas, with Weston, close to the airport. I think this makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it even connects to the Mount Dennisco station, which is between Bloor and Weston Station, and that connects to the new TTC Line 5 service across Midtown Toronto. So
And
this
then
is another line
all the way from
proposed.
Toronto to Ottawa. So this would be replacing the GO train. I mean the Via service.
Yes, this would have been another service replacing Via Rail. This would have gone basically through the existing line right now, but transferred to Go essentially. Would have gone all the way up to Ottawa, syncing the Go Transit fares and timetables with the Via Rail ones.
I think if we have this fast rail that would go from Toronto to Ottawa to Montreal to Quebec, we also need a local service, and so this makes a ton of sense for the local service. But we also need that fast one that doesn't stop, that maybe goes Toronto, Kingston, Ottawa, Montreal, and doesn't have all the stops in between. And then you've got Ottawa to Sudbury. Seriously?
Yeah, so this was another line proposed by that same group that I talked about earlier. This was another one taken over that Go would have taken over from Via Rail. It would have connected the two lines we talked about previously, the one to Ottawa and the one to Sudbury, basically creating a big triangle, essentially, just maximizing the amount of ways you could go on this new big network that they thought about.
You've got, an incredible array of potential expansion for Go and rail in the Greater Toronto Area. What's your sense? Do you think this all has a chance of happening?
I believe what the Think Rail group outlined with the enhanced service within the city of Toronto and all that, I believe that will happen, and that currently is happening through the GO expansion plan, which will electrify the core sections of the GO Transit network, improve service to every 5 minutes, or possibly even less than that, and also um, build the new stations that we talked about earlier, like the one in Humber Bay and the Bowmanville extension and all that. That all has a serious chance of happening. Many of it is under construction right now. It's been worked upon for 10 years now. The network has gone through many upgrades to prepare itself for electrification. That, I believe, will happen. The takeover of Via Rail service within Ontario to places like Buffalo and Detroit and Ottawa, I don't believe that will happen. That seems like a very 1990s vision, which I feel like that sort of proposal can only exist in that time period when Via Rail was being threatened. Via Rail is kind of in a state right now where it's just kind of being ignored, essentially. It's not a big issue in the federal government, but they're also not going to pour more money into it. It's just kind of existing as itself. Um, so there is no threat of Via Rail service ending, which would push Go Transit to take over these lines essentially. So I don't think that will happen. But as you said earlier, the high-speed rail between Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and all that, that is currently being proposed by the federal government. Um, the project name is Alto, ALTO, and it will travel via Peterborough to Ottawa and then onwards to Montreal and Quebec City. That's very early on in its development stage. There's still another 5 years more of planning, but it is the closest we've gotten to high-speed rail in this country so far, which isn't saying a lot because we don't have any. Um, but it's very good to see at least some interest from the government towards this. It's
And
not a lot of interest, but it's some.
And when you think about the amount of carbon dioxide created by cars, I think that if we can get people off of highways and then onto transit and rail, I think it makes a ton of sense. Along on a railway, is the most used rail system in all of North America. And it's got, I think it's 6 lines that bisect Long Island, which is 6 million people that live on Long Island. A lot of them commuting either into Manhattan and or New York City, and New Jersey Transit almost as successful coming from the west, and it's all all on rail, and it's incredibly successful. It does the job. London has taken old rail lines, old freight rail lines, and they've done Crossrail, which is now called the Queen Elizabeth line, and it does an incredible job of knitting the greater London area together like it's never been knitted before. And as I mentioned earlier, it's had a payback within 2 to 3 years when they were initially thinking that it would take more than a decade to get a return on the project. And then they did this. I think it was called Overland, which was all around. It was a big circle around London, all on different freight rails that they knitted together in a passenger rail system that circle London. Chicago is doing something similar to what Smart Tracks was thinking about and what you're describing here, which was taking old passenger rail lines and making use of them to do more passenger rail. I think this makes a ton of sense. And, I really thank you for taking these ideas and putting them into maps that are easy to understand, and then talking to people, both myself and others via social media, about what it could do. Because I think this is transformational for the city of Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area. I think we've invested in transit to a significant degree in the past. We're starting to ramp up our investment with the Eglinton Crosstown, with the Ontario line. I think that the Bolton line makes a ton of sense. I think all-day two-way go on the Milton-Mississauga line makes a ton of sense. I think these new stations at Humber Bay, at Lakeview make a ton of sense. I'd add the one at Sherway. I'd love to see a line go from Long Branch to Kipling to the airport. I do think we need to have a passenger rail that goes straight into Pearson Airport. You've got that at Charles de Gaulle. You've got that at Heathrow. JFK has got a SkyTrain that comes straight from the airport out to Jamaica Station on the Long Island Railway and on the New York subway system. You've got rail that comes from Newark Airport that goes onto New Jersey Rail that goes straight into Penn Station. So I think that there are examples elsewhere in the world that have done passenger rail right, and we haven't, but we've got the chance to do it with exactly the map that you've outlined. I also love this Mid-Toronto line, and I think it would dramatically improve Union Station. I think it would be an express to get to downtown, or get to at least the Yonge and University subway lines on Line 1. I think it'd be a great way to get across the city, so that if you wanted to go from Mississauga to Scarborough for dinner, you could do it. Anyway, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate everyone listening to our conversation about the future of transit in the Greater Toronto Area. Good night, everybody.